Seconds, couple of seconds. There we go. There he is. Okay.
Hi, David. I'm Jane Stahl, and I'm here with
Yergs.
for both sides now. And I am so eager, David, to learn about what is it, outrage, overload, and anger porn, and all those kinds of things. But before we get to the content, can you tell me just a little bit about how you got where you are today?
Well, the short story, I guess.
Yes,
I'll try to give the
the
short story.
short version, please.
Yeah, yeah. So I was a tech guy for many years in Silicon Valley space. Out here in
Were you
California.
really? Wow.
Yeah, and so I did that for many years and kind of moved up through the ranks from software developer as a young person and sort of a math geek, and then kind of moved into management and corporate stuff and I started my own company because I knew everything. I started my own company like we all do, right? And then and that worked out great. But then I sold that company because it actually was pretty successful because the internet. I was doing internet stuff, so that got kind of
Are you a
overwhelmed the
millionaire
company.
then, or a billionaire?
I'm not an Elon Musk billionaire, no. But but yeah, so then I went to a company an internet company. Some people may remember called Earthlink, and
Yeah.
I helped that
Oh yeah.
company get started. And we rolled out dial-up modems, so kind of an internet pioneer from that regard. That I was kind of there doing the kind of rolling out internet to regular folks. But before that, you sort of had the walled gardens and the AOL before it had the internet, and it kind of even then it never really had normal
Get
internet.
out. Wow. I remember AOL. I
Yeah,
remember,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
signing up. Now, when you were in high school, were you a techie in high school?
No, I was a
What did you
troublemaker in
think?
high school.
You were a filmmaker. Did you think you would be creating films today?
No, I was saying I was a troublemaker. I was a
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was a character,
Oh, I
uh,
see. That kind of thing.
and I
So,
got
but
that out of my system pretty early.
now outreach overload and anger porn. Talk to me about what triggered your interest in that particular topic.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah. I didn't even know that one yet. So I'm kind of anxious to hear this, at least
yeah,
for the first time that I'll remember.
yeah. Well, we just had, I was kind of just there like everybody else, and we were kind of dealing with the sort of heat up even before that, but certainly the 2016 election kind of heated
Uh,
things up.
okay.
And you had a lot of people kind of arguing and fighting, and the messaging just kept getting louder and louder, and so on. The news media, the political campaigns, and all that.
Hmm.
And then you sort of throw on top of that, then you sort of have the lockdowns and COVID and
Yeah.
people fighting about that. And so there was just this sort of my own kind of outrage overload. I mean, I was the guy out there having arguments online,
Were you
making sure
really?
I was going to straighten these guys out. And then but also
Also,
around me, my network around me was, you could see these people, they were disconnecting from family and friends and getting in fights and they never speak
exactly.
again. And with COVID, that even got more so. And yeah,
Exactly.
and I talked to my son getting off social media was also somewhat of a catalyst as well. So I kind of talked to him about like what made that happen and or what was his reasons for that, and all that kind of combined to there's something going on here. So I started looking into that and sort of settled in this space of that
Now,
there's this.
when you started looking into that, are you telling me there are Wikipedia articles out there about what do I want to say about the
Well,
anger?
you're actually stumbling on one of the challenges, right? This language isn't
I know. I
that
know.
well defined, right?
So where
So
did you go for research?
yeah, so I started just kind of looking at different things. So I'm kind of a research geek. I ran R&D in corporate world, not in academia world, for a while. So I'm kind of a research geek. So I just kind of started doing that. Like, what are the scientific papers out there, and what topics are they, and what books have been written on some related topics like political polarization and media, and there was a paper called a paper about it was a paper put together by a bunch of scientists that came out in 2020 about around the time of the 2020 presidential elections, and there it was a big sort of they tried to collect a whole bunch of knowledge around sort of political sectarianism in this space, and that became and that was called I should say political polarization, and they gathered all these researchers from different disciplines and put this paper out, and they came out with this new term that they called political sectarianism, where it's actually like
Okay.
religion, right? We're
Sure.
starting to
Sure.
treat it
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
religion.
Yeah. Got it.
And then there was also a book by Jeffrey Berry and Sarah Sobereye. This was actually written like almost 10 years ago now, called The Outrage Industry, which at that time mostly kind of looked at the Tea Party and kind of Rush Limbaugh and talk radio, and some about Fox News and MSNBC and that as well, which were sort of newer and smaller at that time.
Yeah.
And that, but it really captures the same idea. The players have changed a bit. You got social media more involved, but it's really the same thing. There's like this whole
Yeah.
incentive structure for a lot of people that profit off, our outrage, basically, right? So they feed
Yeah.
it to us. So it was that kind of thing, kind of combination of research papers, books, and just kind of my general,
Okay.
So, curiosity.
And had you had this podcast platform prior to this, or did you invent the platform as a way to talk about outrage overload?
Well, when I was first starting into this, I said, okay, there's something here, and I did like I said, I did some research. I looked at whether so what is it? How do I want to talk about this? Is it a vlog? Is it a YouTube channel? Is it a what? And I kind of settled on audio. I think audio could be the way to do it. I had never done a podcast before. I listened to a fair number of podcasts, so I kind of was familiar with the basic idea. But I thought, well, a podcast is a good way I think is a good platform for this, and that's what I settled on as a way to kind of do it in a popular, you don't have to be, you can be science curious, but you don't have to be you don't have to know the math and all that.
You can do what you want. Yes.
Yeah. So I can talk to people as a regular layman and kind of present this fairly tricky stuff, but you don't have to know the math to understand it. I try to break it down in a populist way, or popular way. And so as I decided audio and a podcast made sense, and I sort of went with, instead of the hour, because there's a lot of academics, not necessarily talking about this specific topic, but kind of adjacent topics. There's a lot of academics with science podcasts, and they're all over an hour long, right? They're 2 hours. They're really long. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do a shorter format. We're going to dive in. We're going to keep it interesting, and we're going to kind of get through it a little quicker.
What's your timing then? What's your timing?
I'm shooting for about a 40-minute episode.
Okay. All right. I taught public school for 35 years. And so I figured I had the attention of my students for about 12 minutes. Now that was 20 years ago,
Right.
And I do my own, as Ross probably told you, I do my own podcast called Be Inspired. And I tried initially to keep that down to less than 15 minutes, but I can't. I mean, it goes to 20 or 30, but I really do keep it that. Very rarely do I go over that. This is fascinating. I just love this. Now, when did you connect with Ross? Were you on your own for a while? Are you just with him? How's that working for you?
Yeah. So I started the show in December of 2022, and right away, somehow I got found, or maybe we just connected somehow. I don't remember even how exactly, but I connected with Shippensburg University professor Lawrence Eppard, who had at that time.
We need to talk about that. That's not far from where she's living right now.
Yeah, right. And so he
okay. Got it.
Shippensburg University, in Pennsylvania. And he was running a group called, he was the chairman of a group called, or the director, I guess, of a group called Connors Forum, which was basically, I think the full name was Connors Forum for a Healthy Democracy. And their sort of mission was and is to provide quality information, be nonpartisan, provide quality information. He liked what I was doing, and so we became a Connors Forum podcast. Now, recently, the Connors Forum has now got a tighter association with Shippensburg University, and now it's called the Connors Institute. And so it's a little bit closer affiliation. That probably doesn't change a lot about my podcast, but it's better for the organization. I think it gives us a little more credibility. Plus, it means we can actually, now
alumni funding and things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be able to fund our own research as well.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really happy to be chatting with you, and I want to learn everything about what you're doing. So tell us about it.
I'm sitting back a little bit because I've said, I told David this, and Jane, before we came on with David, I said the same thing to you. I love both of your podcasts because I think that both of you are more than just podcasting. You're both doing excellent research into each podcast. You both bring so much out of your guests and the positivity and the need that society has and probably doesn't know it yet.
Right.
For both of you.
Right.
What I want to quickly ask what I want to quickly ask David is, he mentioned about how the anger was in the media and kind of sort of on, well, you talked about, what I call the Facebook fights. I learned from you, from listening to your podcast, that it's so much deeper than that. It's in life. Have you pinpointed a period when you think people brought that to the grocery store or to wherever in life beyond just watching Fox or CNN or Republican or Democrat?
Yeah, well, not I haven't pinpointed a specific time, but you could sort of look at a timeline. Frankly, kind of starting in the early '90s, you saw this accelerating a little bit, right? You saw this increasing. You saw this hostility becoming more normalized, um, and that was a more steady kind of increase. You started to see kind of people acting kind of like Rush Limbaugh in public, kind of thing, right? This started to be a little bit more
Yeah.
normalized, and I think there was a huge spike with the 2016 election, and maybe there was even some with Obama's election, where this started to be these kind of hostile dialogue and kind of, and a lot of it has to do, accelerate some more. So 2016, it went up some more, and a lot of it has to do with this sorting that we've done, right? Where we always talk about the bubbles and all that. So we've all sorted on many dimensions, right? We've sorted geographically, we've sorted, by race, we've sorted in all these ways that we're in our bubbles, both online where you can do it real easily, but also even in real life, right? We're in these bubbles.
Mhm.
We get used to this kind of very partisan, very high animosity language being normal. And so we wander into a Starbucks in a new town and we start talking like that. And people go, "What are you talking about? You're a crazy person," right? But we're so used to it in our bubble, it's accepted as being as normal. So yeah, and that's, I think, part of the podcast as well, that you just had that acceleration, that where it's just getting crazy now. Like you say, you just have a conversation at a coffee shop now and people are like, this didn't happen 20 years ago.
Right.
Well, does
Right.
your research take you into what can be done?
Yeah, my son was very much, keeping me in check on this, because I didn't want to be, and I am not going to be. So we really focus on this in our thinking about every episode and thinking about every guest and thinking about all what we're doing. I don't want to be a show that's just outrage about outrage, because you could do that. I could just be here
Oh,
railing against outrage, right?
yeah, hate
And I could
that.
just be a
Hate that.
show.
I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. Yep.
So I always try to find, I'm always seeking out both sort of bottom up things, like what can we do as
Yep. Yep.
individuals,
Yep.
and then also top down things, what structurally could change and what could happen from the top down. So
Awesome.
yeah, I don't let any guest get away with just telling me all the problems. Now, a lot of them kind of mostly have, not a lot, many have mostly focused on the problem and haven't come up with great solutions yet. And that's fair. Like, if they don't know, they don't know. But we always make sure we do talk about that. Like, what are some things that we can do? And,
All right,
and there
go.
are a lot of things, and there are a lot of people, a lot of organizations. I mean, there is a huge desire to correct this. So you have really smart people working in many places. You have different disciplines of social sciences, political science. You have some of the smartest people in the world. You also have a lot of practitioners. There's Peter Coleman has identified like 8,000 organizations. He calls them bridge building organizations. So there is a lot of effort and there's a lot of desire to fix this. And that's what I find the most encouraging. Now, at the same time, people that say they want to fix it almost in the same breath might participate in it, right?
Exactly.
Which is all
So,
part of the psychology that I've learned,
so what are they offering? These bridge building organizations.
Yeah, and it varies quite a lot, and we've talked about quite a few, but some of a lot of it is frankly, cliche sort of stuff, right? A lot of it is slowing down, breathing, taking breaths. A lot of it, is just some of this, like, we should have been listening to the Eastern philosophers for a long time, right?
Yes, I'm there.
But so some of it is
Yep.
some of that, and some of it is just, inoculation. So you can do things like, if I'm going to go listen to the news, I can sort of tell myself ahead of time that I know they're going to send me these outrage media things. If they're telling me this or that, they're probably not telling me the whole story. So just be prepared that that's going to happen, and maybe go, okay, they said this thing that sounds a little like, I like it so much because I love when here's the problem, that we're a part of the problem because we love hearing how terrible the other side is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
we love
that makes
hearing what we believe. Yes.
Well, we also love hearing that the other side's terrible because that
Oh,
helps
yes.
us
Yes.
justify that we made the right choice. So when they're
Absolutely.
telling you those kinds of things, which they're going to do, either side, and it doesn't matter which side you're on, if you're listening to any, and there really isn't completely nonpartisan news. Some is better than others. There's the PBSs of the world and things like that. There's other ones, but for the most part, you're going to MSNBC or Fox or something. These are pretty partisan news, so they're going to do this stuff to you, and so be inoculated a little bit, sort of go in knowing they're going to do that. And when they do one of those things that sounds really good, like, oh yeah, that guy's terrible, maybe imagine they aren't telling you the whole story. Like maybe you have to look into it, and sometimes maybe they are, but then even if they are, sort of filter and decide how many things can I be outraged about right now. Pick your outrage battle. So that's
stroke.
without having a stroke and sleeping, not being able to sleep and things like that. Right. So, so that's another thing. Another just simple ones like don't doom scroll in bed or at bedtime. Like put the devices away, shut them off overnight.
Right.
There's a lot of that. And a lot of it is just being more critical of our own side and ourselves. It's looking in the mirror.
Let me ask you this. It seems to me that all those are great suggestions that people will kind of dismiss until there's a moment when we can't do this anymore.
When they reach outrage overload.
Yes, exactly. Do you see that happening? Do you talk about that at all? Because that's what concerns me. And of course, January 6th is a perfect example of that, right? And
exactly, yeah.
Seems to me that we're kind of, can we, does that have to happen? I mean, it's just like the addict who has to get to the bottom, right, before he is interested in doing anything about it. It seems to me, sadly, correct me, please, if you think differently, but it seems to me things have to fall pretty much apart totally before we're paying attention to much at all. What do you think?
But wasn't January 6th a good example of where we could have been at a bottom?
Yeah, but it didn't
one
work.
would think, but I don't think so. Do you? Yeah. I mean, do you think we're on the way up? I don't.
Well, I'm gonna answer yes and no because I think there's both things can be sort of true at once. First of all, I think there's a misperception that as many people are in that extreme bucket and are ready for that as we think they are, right? So there is, like I say, there is a desire. There are more people that they may have strong positions. My podcast is not a centrist advocacy show, right? It's fine to have strong positions, but what we're trying to do is bring down the temperature in the dialogue, bring down the temperature in other words, disagree better because we can't do anything if we can't disagree. But so there is a large group of people that aren't that way, right? We see those because again, it's part of the way the media works, right? Those people stand out. All the people that kind of are more part of the solution or could be part of the solution that are out there are the quiet ones. So we've got a problem there that we get this misperception that because those people have rolled out of social media. It's like, I've had it. Like I'm out, right? Yeah. They're not out there screaming because they aren't the screamers, right? So we see the screamers and that makes it seem like, they're a larger part than they are. But at the same time, to the other half, that's kind of the scary part is I think the screamers are, those on the extremes, it's going to be a challenge. I think that's going to be a tough one because those extreme ones, as you say, we saw January 6th, that wasn't enough to pull them back to say, maybe I'm going too far. And right now, I'd argue that we're not quite there on the left, but a recent study by, this was put out by Brookings, I believe, found that 1 in 3 Republicans, the question was along the lines of things are so bad, it's time for patriots to act, with violence, right, to fix it. Yeah. And it's a question like that. 1 in 3 Republicans answer yes to that. But 1 in 5 Democrats. So it's still, they could do it too, right? And there's a study about.
That's interesting. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, to your point that it's kind of bad. So that is kind of scary that I think the extremes on both sides are less likely because they're just wedded to it more. But we do have to appreciate there's a large segment that's not those extremes. So it's kind of, the answer is kind of both. I don't know exactly what to do with those extremes, but if at least we can help this other group, what some people call sort of the exhausted majority, that's going to be an improvement. And maybe that can cascade into the rest of the world, right?
You had said that a moment ago, and it's kind of been everything I've been doing is, just not only my personal political beliefs. I am very polarized. There are very conservative mindsets of mine and very liberal mindsets of mine. It's not like I'm just in the middle. But the question I have is, do you think that majority, that middle majority, could be or should be or actually somewhere is as active as the very loud extremes? Or are we sitting on our ass?
Yeah, we mostly are, sitting on our, as you say, but, because we've been sort of pushed out, like we're just exhausted. We're literally exhausted, and
Exactly.
and we just don't want to have
Yeah.
those arguments, we don't want to have those fights. So, we also talk with different people practicing that, like how to have better conversations, but you can't make it a low energy thing. Like there's not an easy way to change somebody's mind or to have those dialogues. It's hard work.
Jane and I talked about that on one of our Both Sides Now episodes before. In fact, when we were contemplating having you on, she asked me something related to, outrage, but in her school teacher mannerisms, she kept her cool. But I'm going to make sure my hands are, she's sitting there kind of wringing her hands as she's about to ask. And I said, there you go.
Mhm.
But can you talk a little bit about the difference between
Mhm.
pissed off and passionate,
Mhm.
where perhaps one is acceptable and one is what we're trying to get rid of? Can people still be passionate and not be outraged?
Yeah, I think you can. And I'm not even necessarily saying you sort of, that maybe there are things to be outraged about, right? But at least maybe it's time to pick your battles a little bit on that, and not be, because we can't be outraged about everything, like you were saying before. It's just not healthy, and it also doesn't get anything done. And I think if you're going to pick your battles on being outraged, then what is your action? Because that's the other problem, right? When we just
Yes.
go online and be
Yes.
outraged, then we're just outraged. We're not getting anything done. I mean, I have people in my Facebook feed, you probably do too. Every third day they post something like minimum wage, $25, or else. It's like, oh, yeah, or else what? Like, it should be,
What? Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, what are you doing about it? You just say that every third day. It's not getting anything done. So I think when you pick those battles, then that's great. Then figure out how you can, be active in that space, and maybe let some other stuff go, right? Like maybe I don't care about the other thing that much.
One of the things I had conversation with Ross about a number of episodes ago was, I think people are really addicted to their outrage, to
No,
their
we are.
anger.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I mean, it's so much easier to be angry and yell and carry on than to actually do something positive. And
Right.
so it becomes,
And you look like a
cortisol
hero.
high.
You get rewarded for it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
it's
So
giving us all that
making
dopamine,
people
right?
more aware of their addiction to outrage, I think, might be one of the steps we do in order to, what do you say, break the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest parts of the show, right? Because that's the biggest ask I have for listeners, is to be introspective, to, realize that you are part of the problem, and we together are all addicted to this stuff. We like it. So, that turns some people off. Those people are going to walk away. I mean, I can't do that much about that, because I'm going to stay to that message. Just like I also preach, because it's also another part of the Connors Institute, is I also preach this intellectual humility, right? Also be prepared that you might be wrong, right? And if
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, and if you're going to go into a conversation, which you could almost call, it's like you were saying in the very beginning, this is the podcast that people don't know they need, kind of thing, right? The most common thing I hear from people, or certainly one of the most common, is, yeah, but how do I fix those other guys? I get it.
Yeah.
This polarization is wrong. How do I fix the other guys?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, first of all, that's a misguided thing, because if you go into one of these conversations with somebody, let's say you're going to go try to restore a relationship with Uncle Bob, who has 3 Thanksgivings, you haven't been able to deal with him or whatever, right? If you go in saying, I'm going to fix Uncle Bob this time, it's not going to work. So, you need to go into that conversation saying, hey, I have something to learn from Uncle Bob, right? It's like, this is a collaboration. We've both got something to learn. I don't have all the answers, right? I can learn something from Uncle Bob. And unless you're prepared to say that, then don't even start the conversation, right? I mean, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. Right, 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 right.
Yeah, that's what got me into the Facebook fights in the past was I had actual facts. And factually, forget about, where I'm falling politically, factually I knew that I was right. And it was such a desire to help people. And then I'm mother effing somebody and they're, shooting it right back at me 10 minutes
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did it get like this?
Mhm.
But I think it's my parents always, my dad especially, he's going to, laugh when he hears this episode. Worry about yourself.
Mhm.
Worry less about fixing Uncle Bob
Mhm.
and be that leader that you wish you had
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
other people need.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's a lot of people that come to that thinking. Well, so that for many years that there was this idea of this information deficit model, right? This was idea that if you just provide the facts, we'll
Right.
all come to the same. We'll all have a
Conclusion.
shared understanding of the world, right? Well,
Right.
guess the ironic thing about the information deficit theory as is with more information we've discovered that doesn't right. It's not a
Yeah.
good theory. It's now turned into sort of a hypothesis that is no longer really supported, right, by the facts. So what you find, and particularly when things become moralized and it becomes associated with our identity, it's even more so. So then at that point, facts don't really help because, the classic example is sort of we can have the same facts and then have a different attitude about those facts later, right? So even, some people have talked about the idea of I had a girlfriend and I would say things like, oh, the way she walks, it's just amazing. The way she eats, it's just amazing. Then later, a few months later, when we're breaking up, oh my God, the way she walks, it drives me crazy. I can't stand it. The way she eats, I can't even look at her anymore, right? So it's the same exact facts. Nothing changed about the facts, but your interpretation and your
right.
and your attitude about those facts has changed, right? So the
Yeah.
same people can have, different people can have the same facts. And I mean, sometimes there's a fact gap and you can argue that there's a fact gap there, but those facts aren't going to really fix or not going to have everybody come to the same conclusion. That's not how brains work. That's not how things work. And some things are more clear cut than others, but when you get in this political stuff, it's got moralization associated with it. You've got identity associated with it. And that just makes, there's this whole concept of knowledge resistance. And it's very powerful, right? So, and the funny thing is you think, oh, the other person's dumb, right? It's actually the opposite. Like smarter people can rationalize those kind of
Oh
like
yes. Oh
inconsistent
yes.
facts even better, right? So smart
Oh yeah.
people are the
And
ones that can really get into this.
because they have such an authoritarian, what do you say, tone, and do
Right.
have the words to. The rest of us are just cowed by the fact that they're so good with words, and we're not quite as clever, or not quite as fast, or not quite as substantive, or something. So we let them. We let them. We let them.
And
We
they're
let them
better at fooling
dominate.
themselves too, so they actually believe the stuff, even if
Yeah.
the like the two things kind of can't exist at the same time. But if you're really smart, you can sort of talk yourself into it that it makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So your mission, would you say, is to help people not get nuts? Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
I think it's a fact. A big factor is to be less stressed out about this stuff, right?
Yep.
And then that'll create a better civic dialogue, right? So now
Okay.
it has this first step is kind of, you just improve yourself, but by improving yourself, you'll be a better citizen, right? You'll be a more
Mhm.
effective citizen. So it also helps society as well. So if we could do this at scale, this is how we can create the society
Excellent.
that will support the democracy that we want.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So do you come from a particular spiritual practice?
No, I don't. I do. I'm open to that. Like there's places where some of the things I talked about before, and I even
Mhm.
mentioned sort of the Eastern philosophies and things like that.
Mhm.
There's actually a fair bit of science. So I guess my spiritual side is the science side, right? My science is my
Fair
spirituality.
enough.
But
Yeah.
what you find that there are things that there's scientific studies that have backed up things like meditation, and
Mhm.
things like mindfulness that actually do things. And there's even subsequent science to that, or the meta science, I guess I'll say, that explains why that might be. Now they may not have all that figured out yet, but they have some ideas about why those things work, metacognition and things like that. So I'm
Mhm.
all for, I'm fine with the science kind of validating thing. I'm not opposed to the ideas of that come from some other place, like didn't originate in the scientific community. But I do kind of like to see them kind of backed up by some science. I'm a little bit less, interested in a lot of just, new age stuff thrown out of thin air, unless it's also been sort of looked at scientifically.
I think a lot of it, or
So
some of it, I don't want to say all, most, some, whatever, but I think a lot of it does link to scientific reality, shall we say? The whole meditation thing and whatnot is so scientifically, that exercise, that kind of thing, what could be called new age woo woo kind of stuff, but it's got its basis in science, which I love. Now, if you could take one person out of the picture that you think might help the dialogue generally, who might it be?
just
I mean,
remember, you're sitting here.
back in the day, it would be Newt Gingrich.
Oh, you mean take out a bad actor sort of thing that's
You got
causing
it.
trouble?
Yeah.
Yeah, just remember, you're sitting here with a retired Secret Service agent. Be careful how you word it.
Yeah. That's the thing. I'm not sure I can blame any individuals, right? I mean, you certainly have a lot of bad actors, right? I mean, there's not just, I couldn't pick out just one, because again, I come back to that. The problem is us. I mean, we're the ones who create this environment, that we're the ones who want that energy. We're the ones
Yep.
who want the outrage. So I have a hard time picking out any one person that would just instantly solve the problems. I don't think it's true. I don't think you could take it out, because the demand, it's a supply and demand problem, right?
All
If
right.
you, I mean, I guess you'd have to get, one person isn't generating enough supply to fix the problem, right? If you fix one person, somebody else going to fill in that gap because the supply
Yeah.
didn't change. I mean, the
Okay.
demand didn't change.
I just tried to make it real clear.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't take a lot of positions on issues on the show, but we have talked to. I mean, you for the most part, it's gonna upset Trump supporters, but I mean, for the most part, people in science, whether they're left, I mean, I have some right-leaning political scientists, because it's hard to find right-leaning people in academia. So I have some go-to right-leaning people that I know lean right. I mean, none of them are Trump supporters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though they
Fair
lean
enough.
right.
Fair enough. And I really wasn't leading you to that to that particular individual whom you just referenced. I really was not.
But yeah, I will say that your Newt Gingrich one is kind of like, I call Newt Gingrich sort of, if this outrage engine was Christianity, Newt Gingrich is St. Paul, right? I mean, he is the one that really started it and promoted it big time.
Absolutely. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I recognized that from the first time he entered the fray.
And we're still carrying around the language.
Not going to end well. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're still carrying around the language that he put out, that sort of memo that the 17 things are actually more than 17.
Thank you so much.
Even Mitt Romney just said about how he is one person that thinks too highly of himself.
Newt is?
Mitt Romney said that about Newt Gingrich. I think I might have crossed over the first names there a second ago, but Mitt Romney said that about Newt Gingrich, that he's somebody that just flat out thinks too highly of himself.
Yeah,
and I see it on Fox. It's like, I should still be the speaker, type attitude.
Yeah, very good, very good. So, how can we help you with your mission?
Well, I mean, I love talking about this subject, so you've already helped by just letting me talk about the subject. I mean, I could talk about this stuff forever, and we've barely touched on a lot of the science and stuff that's out there. I guess any kind of feedback, like what do you see out there? I kind of have my ideal listener, sort of like this exhaustive majority type person who's ready to sort of face that maybe I'm part of the problem, or at least open to that dialogue. And that's going to turn off some people. It already has, some people want me to go rail against everything too. And that's just not what we do.
I think I've said that before. And I know the one time I worded it poorly, but I had nothing else to say. You can't be angry. You can't be talking about anger porn and then be angry about it. Right. It's going to defeat the entire purpose. And I think that's one of the things that's brilliant about you, is that you do practice what you preach.
Yeah.
And I know in the previous, analysis, I had no other words to use. So I said that you were kind of boring. But sitting here listening to you in all actuality, and it's happened to me before too. I'm listening to your show and I'm like, oh my God, he's so onto something. And I got to chill out, but you are very much, I've said, earlier, you both have a study going on, not just a podcast. and you reiterated what I said earlier too, is that people need both of you, and that's why today I'm just kind of sitting here monitoring the levels and making sure everybody sounds good. Because I wanted you to be a guest on Jane's podcast individually, but she focuses on more than just more of just our hometown.
Mhm.
Right.
So she said, "Well, what about for both sides now? We hadn't
Right.
had any guests yet.
Yeah.
Last week was our first guest, and that's
Yeah.
because we're also trying to lower a certain temperature in our
Exactly.
hometown with politics and stay, as I say, up the middle."
Yeah.
Let me ask you this though.
Mm.
I am very guilty of one of your no-nos. And that is when I go crawl in the bed, I cuddle up with this mastiff that's on the floor right here, but I still have my phone in my hand.
Mm.
And you know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
More political shit for me to work on tomorrow.
Yeah.
How can I change that? I know I need to stop it. That doesn't mean I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you need. Well, before I jump into that, I do want to, because you were mentioned about the local news, and we talked earlier a little bit about some of the ways that look promising for things we can do. One is to focus more on local things, right? Because as we've lost local news and there's no budget for local news anymore, so a lot of us don't have local news. The national news, of course, tries to get us stirred up about national issues all the time, and for the most part, those issues affect us a lot less than what's going on in our local area. So I think that's
That's right.
great that you're focusing on the local news, because we need and what's going on locally, because that's another way to really improve things as well. Because the other thing is you're getting to meet people from your neighborhood, right? And unless you're a completely fully town that's nothing but one side or the other, you're probably going to meet some people that are on a different place on the spectrum
Mhm.
or don't agree with you about everything, and you can see they're just
Right.
normal people, and
Well,
that's a big factor in that as well.
and I think you're right about that, because one thing that I have read recently, there's all this contention with school board politics and whatnot. But if you ask people who have children in school, they love their teachers. Despite all the wrangling that goes on in the school board room, moms and dads are like their teachers, like their children's teachers, and focusing on that is helpful to keep you from outrage.
Yeah, and like go to the fire department meetings and stuff like that. You can see
Exactly.
that, like, we're
Yeah.
all in this together. We want the same things, right? In a lot of those cases.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so back to Ross's question, it is just a little bit of self-discipline, but there are tools. I mean, if you have, like, the phones usually have kind of a sleep wake mode, and you could turn that on, and it'll kind of start you in sleep wind down mode. 15 minutes before bedtime, and you sort of just find another routine. It can be hard though. I mean, it can be hard to do it for sure.
Well,
And
you have to find your higher power, Ross.
well, I mean, maybe it's listening to, like, calming music or something like that. Go to sleep
Yeah.
with some calming music or something like that. That might help. But yeah, definitely doom scrolling. There's a lot of science about this, that because our bedroom is supposed to be our safety, security
Mm-hmm.
place, and now you're bringing in all this fear and anger into the place that's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be sacred, right?
Well, the nice thing I'm older and my hearing isn't very good. And even though my husband has the TV on to fall asleep, I can't make out what they're saying. So it's just white noises.
That's another
Unless
solution,
I'm
white noise.
reading the captions, forget it. Very
But yeah,
good. Thank you so much. Mhm.
oh yeah,
Yep.
this is great. I like I said, I could talk about this stuff forever, and there's so many. I'm so encouraged by how much is going on. That's another thing that makes it easy to talk about, is that there is, when I first started this podcast, I come up with about 10 topics, and I said, maybe that's it. Maybe I do 10 things and I'm done, right? And the
Right.
more I get into it, every time I talk to another guest, they point me at some new research, and they point
No
me at some new
kidding.
research, and it's just been there's so much going on in this space, and there's so much. I mean, I don't know how long it'll go, but there's so much more you could talk about, and there's so much happening in this space that it's really
Awesome.
pretty
Awesome.
cool.
Well, I would love to talk to you again,
Yeah.
about another aspect that you learn relative to this, because this goes so much hand in hand with what I do. And that is, as Ross has explained, to find people's passion and inspiration and give them a platform to talk about it, because there are so many wonderful people in the world. So as you come up with, and maybe we can talk about this, maybe Ross and I can talk about this, but I'd love to have you back to talk about
Absolutely.
something you learned recently that you can enlighten us with. I'd love that. That would be great.
Oh yeah, happy to. That'd be awesome.
That'd be great.
Yep, very much so. So, David, I know one place we can find you. That's outrageoverload.net, N-E-T, not .com, .net. Where else can we find you?
Well, that's the best place to start because it also has links to everywhere else. But I'm Outrage Overload on Instagram. I'm Outrage Overload on Facebook. You can also find my personal accounts on Twitter and Instagram. So I'm Mr. Blog that's an old account from 20 something years ago. So
Mr. Blog.
yeah, so
Really?
I was mocking blogs at the time when I came up with that username.
I love that. That's
And here you are.
And here I am. Yeah. So Mr. Blog on Twitter and Mr. Blog on Instagram. Those two accounts. I don't think I have that name on Facebook. I'm not sure, but those are my personal ones. You can reach out, say hi, whatever you want to say, and I do answer all those. And again, all those contacts are on the website as well. But there is also email if you care to, outrageoverload@gmail.com. And I do answer. What I always say is I answer every email and every DM eventually, but I answer every single one.
Very good. Very good.
Very awesome. David Beckmeyer from Outrage Overload, and can be found on Yerg's Radio 7 days a week at 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern, from 2:30 to 3:34, and then 4 to 5:30 are You're Too Dead. So yeah, and right before that is Be Inspired from 1 to 2:30, 7 days a week. So David, thank you for joining us, and I second that. Definitely want to have you back and continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
At a low temperature.
Well, I do get passionate about this stuff, but yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure. Definitely our pleasure. All right, everybody. That's this episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. I'm Yergs.
I'm Jane Stahl, and this is Both Sides.
Both Sides Now. Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.